The following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Welcome to Chit Chatting with Jocelyn. I am your host, and my co-host today, Testerman, is with us again, and we have an absolutely incredible guest. It is Elliot Axelman. You have seen him before. We talked about taxes. I forget what else we talked about. It was a lot of stuff because he talks fast and so do I. But today, we are going to talk about the plague that must not be questioned. And in fact, Elliot has submitted it to another publisher who has, do you want to hold that up, Elliot? Who has made it to half the size and a little fatter. So whatever your pleasure is. And this is what we're going to be talking about. Corona fascism. Welcome to the show, Elliot.
Thank you very much for having me back.
It's super exciting to have you here. We have a few things in common. We've run into each other multiple times, Karen.
I hope you haven't
Lou,
hurt each other when you're running into each other.
Yeah, well, just a few times. And Elliot would be like, you know me, you know who I am. And I did, but I just never put two and two together with the books and the writing and going to the rallies and talking. And then he said, I'm a medic. So, the little... And he's going to hate me for that one. But because we know medics are kind of like gods. And they're wonderful. When you have a really good medic, there is nothing better than a great medic. As an advanced EMT, I have to tell you, it is so exciting. I would be so excited to be able to go out and do some calls with you. I think that would be incredible. I think we'd drive people crazy because we'd be talking 100 miles a minute.
Have fun.
And we would have fun. So watch out, New Hampshire.
That's for when you have your own private.
Yes.
One day in our dreams when we have our own EMS company.
Right.
So we all need to play Megabucks, Powerball, Mega Millions for the only reason that we can start a private EMS service and private physician, nursing, healthcare facilities.
I'm on board. If Karen's paying for it, I'm on board.
Absolutely. Karen Testerman for governor. There you go. So now we've got our plugs. And we do take donations if you would like to help with this private EMS healthcare. So, it's funny, but it's not funny. It's very upsetting what's gone on in the United States of America in the last 2 years. And I mean, it's been for decades, but that everybody can identify with 100%. They can touch it, they can smell it, they know what's going on. They may not understand why or the extent of it, but the last 2 years have really, really, really destroyed life as we know it in the United States.
Except it has opened up the door for extensive research. And people have really gone in and taken the time. And a lot of good minds have gone in and really been digging deep to find out some things and exposing some things that we would never have
even thought to look at.
Well, we would never have taken the time to look at because our lives were going very quickly.
So, Elliot, you dive into everything, and you do it 1,000%. There is no part way with you. I've discovered that. 9 books?
Yes, published 3, going to submit the 4th, 5th, and 6th.
Okay.
And I translated 1 into Espanol, like a short booklet.
Okay.
So, I don't know, 7, 8, whatever.
Okay, it's up there. It's over 5. So, the plague that must not be questioned, the plague that we're talking about is the coronavirus, not to be mixed up with the influenza. They are 2 different things. They are 2 different families. Yep, good word. And correct. Talk to us about the differences and this coronavirus that has got everybody by the neck and turning our world upside down.
the difference between coronavirus and influenza
And influenza first, yeah.
In the book, I actually discuss it in one of the chapters. And influenza virus is a family of viruses, various types of influenza. Every year there are various strains, and the theory is every year the vaccine, I think, takes the two most common strains from the prior year and might give you some protection if you get those strains next year, and a bit of protection if you get other strains. So that's a family of viruses. We know it's moderately to very communicable, infectious, and it's pretty dangerous to those with comorbidities, to those without comorbidities, those who are pretty young and healthy like us. Very, very unlikely to kill you, probably unlikely to get you very sick. You're probably going to get mildly sick to maybe moderately sick. When I got flu once a few years ago, 5, 6, 7 years ago, I was a young, healthy 20-year-old boy. I was in bed for 2 days. I thought I was dying or dead. I didn't leave my bed for 2 days. I don't even know if I went to the bathroom. I was so weak and tired, and that was the flu, and it was bad. Some get it bad, some don't. Coronavirus is extremely similar. In all my research I've done in spending 2 weeks in Atlanta in May of 2020 in a COVID hospital, just around doctors working on just stable, moderate to mild COVID patients in Atlanta. In all my research, have not seen a lot that would make it seem very different from influenza. Coronavirus, similarly, is also fairly infectious, so pretty contagious, and fairly mild, but could be moderate or severe if you have comorbidities. If you are extremely old, obese, immunocompromised, or have other big heart or lung issues like COPD. So very similar. The one big difference I would say, because they're very, very similar, very infectious, not very deadly, but if you are very sick, it can kill you. Very similar. The one big difference that I would say that makes them different is for children. Flu, correcting for age and for how healthy you are or how sick, the flu does affect some kids. Considering their age, it does kill some kids. It kills a few hundred kids per year. Coronavirus seems to be child sparing, meaning even controlling for all the other factors, it kills essentially little to no kids. And in the book, I go through statistics. I have a whole chapter on just think of the children, because that's what tyrants say when they take our liberties, is they think of the children. Right. So the chapter called Think of the Children, it goes into the data. And I go from the CDC and the American Academy of Pediatrics and New England Journal of Medicine, I believe.
I'll throw out a couple figures.
Yeah, so you have the graph there?
I have the graph.
Yeah, so look at the top 10 killers of children. And the CDC, for full disclosure, it measures, in some states, every state does it differently because state is synonym with country. Every state measures it, some under 21, some under 18 years old. But regardless, the top 10 killers in the United States for kids are, I think the number one killer is motor vehicle accidents.
Motor vehicle at 4,074.
Kids a year. And how many does coronavirus kill per year?
133.
Yeah, around between 133 and 250 were all the different estimates. In 2020, I think some of them say 200, 250, but not 4,000. Right? So if we, if we can totally eliminate coronavirus, the maximum we could save is 100 to 200 kids, maybe 250 lives of children per year. That's the maximum benefit, right? If we totally eliminate coronavirus from this universe, we could save 250 kids per year. And they say to save 250 kids per year, to save even one life, we should end the entire world as we know it. Lock down everyone indefinitely, end the economy. I discussed the economy in the book, the biggest crash in history of the United States.
Correct.
Right? So if we should flip upside down the world to save 250 kids, shouldn't we also flip over the world to save 4,000 kids a year?
Yes.
Let's ban all motor vehicles. I hope when you're governor, you're going to ban all vehicles, ban driving.
No. I'm one who trusts the people to make their own decisions, so I'm not dictating to anybody. Unfortunately.
You sound like a crazy conspiracy theorist,
I am.
insurrectionist. You believe in liberty over security and live free or die? How dare you?
Yeah. Well, you know what?
You want to sit over here?
So that's the one big thing I discussed about the children. It applies to everyone, but that's the one big difference. If you would ask me the difference between flu and coronavirus, they're very similar. They're dangerous to some people. Overall, very mild. Overall, similar to the flu. So you should be careful. And for years in medicine, as you know, as advanced EMT, medics, doctors, we take the flu very seriously. Back when we thought masks used to work, I have data in the book, a whole chapter on all the studies saying masks don't work, but in medicine, people do wear masks for the flu. They always have, always will.
Correct.
They are careful. They wash their hands very much. They understand the flu. If you get it, you won't die, but you're going to give it to your old patient and they might die. So we've taken the flu seriously. I would have hoped we'd take COVID roughly as seriously as the flu, but not a billion times more serious than the flu, multiplied by Ebola and TB. And again, I was a medic during the Ebola thing, and we were all extremely afraid. Ebola has a mortality rate of, I believe, 50%, like 50 to 80, which is tremendous, unheard of in this universe. Everything else is like 0.001% or 1% or 0.5%. A 50 to 80% mortality with Ebola. Yeah. That's
and
why.
And that was a mere 3-4 years ago. It was less than 5 years ago. Came through Texas. We had a couple of patients in Texas, and you saw people in you saw the EMS basically in a biohazard suit.
And
right?
that seemed appropriate because, from what I understand
For
about
a
Ebola,
50% death rate,
but the death
yeah.
rate, but also Ebola was apparently like as transmissible as anything in the world. Apparently, it was respiratory or fluids or touching someone. Apparently, it was, I think, the most contagious thing. I think like worse than TB, meningitis, flu, COVID. So it was extremely infectious and extremely deadly. So it was scary.
Lock down.
We didn't lock down the
We
healthy
didn't
people.
stop the world. We didn't restrict
Business.
business. We
We
didn't
didn't tell you were essential or non-essential.
essential or non-essential. We didn't stop children being educated.
And an important thing to mention that I do discuss in the book, I think, is even if, so COVID, the death rate, we don't know because they're testing a lot of people, but some get it and they are positive for COVID, but they don't get a test and go to the hospital. So we don't know. The mortality rate might be 0.0001%. All the stats are inflated. They're saying it's 0.5 or 1% or 1 to 3%, which is very high. The stats I explain in the book, and that's the most important thing, one of the first chapters, I explain the stats are inflated by, I don't know, maybe 1,000-fold, maybe a million-fold. And I explain how they inflate statistics. It was, in short, the PCR tests being cycled 40 to 45 times instead of 20
Correct.
times.
So that they could find out, what you had when you were 3.5 years old.
So that right there might give you 99.999% false positives because every cycle is like doubling. So it actually becomes
Correct.
exponential.
So by the time you get to
but that's
45.
nothing compared to the money they were giving 13,000 or 39,000 to hospitals whenever they said
That's right.
COVID diagnosis. If I give you money to say COVID, you're going to say COVID very often because I'm
Well,
giving you
and
39,000.
that was a CDC pamphlet that went out that said you will no comorbidities will be reported, just COVID.
Exactly, and that gets into the third thing. So there's the money, there's the PCR test over cycling, which now they've admitted, they admit everything.
Right.
After gaslighting us for 2 years and calling us crazy conspiracy theorists. But the biggest thing was the symptom list. Remember about 2 years ago, they said, here's the list of symptoms that could be COVID. And again, that's what happens with flu and pneumonia and everything else. They say, here are symptoms. It could be difficulty breathing, cough, maybe weakness and chest pain, pleuritic chest pain from your lungs. But then that list expanded, right? And I saw this whenever I entered a hospital or a nursing home, even as a medic. They would not let me in unless I answered the question. And over the weeks in 2020, every week it got longer. And then they would ask me, sir, Mr. Medic, have you had any difficulty breathing or shortness of breath, cough, weakness, headache, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, rapid heart rate, slow heart rate, any kind of weakness, any pains, and the list goes on and on and on.
Yeah.
Have I had diarrhea in the last
on your
week?
finger.
Or, have I had any headache or weakness or pain or tachycardia, which over 100, right?
Correct.
And that's the metric. Over 100 on the pulse is tachycardia.
Yeah.
That's a symptom of COVID, right? So once they started saying,
Don't
if you
get
have a symptom,
excited.
yeah, exactly. So I'm in the hospital. I see a acute nurse. Heart rate's over 100, and the problem is
You didn't really say that.
I hope my wife's not going to watch it. So remember the term pathognomonic?
Yeah.
It means if you have one symptom, sometimes you could be 100% sure it's one disease. Some symptoms are general, like weakness. Some symptoms are very, very specific to one disease. They made it seem like every symptom, like shortness of breath and weakness and headache, which
Was
are
COVID.
pretty general. Everyone in the world gets headaches sometimes. They said if they have it, it's pathognomonic, and doctors should be 100% sure it's COVID. So much that they don't even have to test. So if you go to a hospital, and this is, I believe, how it worked, according to CMS and FDA and CDC guidelines, if someone comes to the ER with anything, could be shot with buckshot, doesn't matter, MVA, motorcycle accident.
But do you have a headache?
If they have any of the symptoms or signs or symptoms, so tachycardia, bradycardia, tachypnea, hypoventilation, headache, weakness, nausea, anything, any symptom in the universe, literally a list of 30 symptoms, don't even test them, just assume they have COVID because we're 100% sure they have COVID. And that's, again, how they overcount by a factor of like a billion, right? So if everyone in the hospital, by definition, has a symptom because it's a place
Then they
to
all
sick
have
people,
COVID.
Yeah, but it gets worse. Wait, there's more. But wait, there's more. And even if you say you have zero symptom in the world, you're 100% healthy, you're an angel, you're perfect cyborg, you have no illness. Have you been exposed to anyone in the past 2 weeks that might have had one of those symptoms?
Oh, lockdown.
Yeah, by doing that, that's how they trapped everyone to essentially be able to say anyone in the universe technically can be considered a COVID patient, even without a test. And again, we saw with the morgues, with the pathologists who are doing the death certificates. Even if you never did a test for COVID, if they had any symptom of COVID, like tachycardia or weakness before they died, which, as you know, in the process of dying, when you're in the ICU in your final days, almost every patient, maybe 90%, have sepsis, meaning they're going to have a lot of those symptoms.
Right.
Weakness, rapid heart rate, rapid breathing, fever, infection, So almost everyone could be considered
process of dying.
any kind of septic or anything, trauma, anything respiratory failure could be considered COVID. So with all these reasons in the book, I explain how it could be inflated theoretically by 1 billionfold. It's probably inflated only by 100-fold or 1,000-fold, but they made the biggest wide net ever where they say pretty much any human being who's a human with a heart can be considered COVID.
Can be considered.
So yeah, so that's the one thing we have to establish first about the statistics. So when we say there have been people yell at me and say, you're so insensitive, you want to kill people. We've had, I don't know the number, 2 million deaths in the US. Whatever they say is the garbage number. I say the stats are inflated by like 1,000-fold, so relax. And even according to their stats, still heart disease kills more. Still more kids die. More kids die from what? Fires, drowning, choking. These are things according to their stats.
But you're so uncaring. You just
We
don't
don't
understand.
care.
You sound like Senator...
Suffocation, 1,430.
You sound like Representative Grassi, who just said, I tested positive for COVID, therefore we can't meet as legislators anymore in person because if we do, we're going to expose everybody to COVID. Yeah. All right.
Oh my God. This is just beyond comprehension. It truly is insanity.
Well, and so one of the things that Dr. Gold said, Simone Gold, was that her father, who was also a physician, said that in your senior years, your friend was the flu because it impacted your respiratory system, right? And you tended to die from it eventually because you developed pneumonia.
Right.
So this has been typical throughout history, and yet
It's nothing new.
No,
Really nothing new.
nothing new. But today, it's deadly. It's got to shut
So
everything down. It's got to make the world stop. I want to get off.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I'd like the world to stop, but not that way. I'd like to stop it on an island, not have to do.
You just want to go sit in the sun and get that vitamin D. That's all.
Vitamin D. So the other thing that this corona plandemic brought around is no free speech, censorship, pitting one person against the other. 46 yesterday and today pitted the vaccinated against the unvaccinated. This is the pandemic of the unvaccinated. So my son, who works in the ER down in Boston, one of the biggest city hospitals, I said to him, honestly, are most of the people in the ER unvaccinated? He said, no, they're all the dopey people that want a test. They can't get one, so they go in, they pretend to cough and feel sick and say, oh my God, woe is me, and they get a test. He said, that's what the ER is full of. People that want a test because they want to go back to work or they want to go see grandma or something like that. And I said, okay, subtract those out of the number of people there. Is your ER jam-packed? Well, it's full, but we're a city hospital, so I've got gunshot wounds, I've got stabbings, I've got, grandma and grandpa had a heart attack, I've got car accidents, I've got this, I've got that, blah, blah, blah. And I said, all right, subtract them out. Who's left? And he said, tons of vaccinated people with an illness that we really can't identify because it's the cold or a flu or any of those symptoms that you were talking about, Elliot. They look sick, they sound sick, they feel sick, but we can't identify it because it's not identifiable.
And when you say vaccinated versus unvaccinated, and I asked a friend who works in a hospital pharmacy, she's a pharmacist, she works in the ICUs a lot, and she said the patients there who are critical in the ICUs are roughly half vaccinated, half not, but we have to be careful because everything's complicated now. And as I say, I have a whole chapter about moving goalposts in the book. They're always moving the goalposts. So now we're up to 1, 2, 3 boosters. So when you look at the articles, they say, we have this hospital with, let's say, 90% capacity in the ICU, and 78% are not fully vaccinated. Well, what does fully vaccinated mean now?
You have to have the booster.
You have all the latest booster. I don't know if we're up to 2 or 3. I don't pay attention to current fascism. But with Pfizer, obviously Pfizer runs Israel, they're up to 4 or 5 boosters now. So they only consider you fully vaccinated once you get the latest booster plus 2 weeks to let it take effect.
Plus 2
so
weeks.
So if you're anywhere beyond that, so if you got the latest booster like 13 days ago and you're in the ICU, they're going to say you're not fully vaccinated. Which again, people who don't pay attention to semantics because they don't read libertyblock.com enough, they don't know how to parse these things out. They say, look, pandemic of the unvaccinated. Let's go. Brandon was right. It's a winter of, what did he say? Severe illness and death.
Yeah.
He wished upon us. Very nice of him, by the way, to wish that upon us. He's a very nice guy. So yeah, we have to be careful when we say not fully vaccinated. That's why they're not saying unvaccinated. Even they don't want to lie that much, right? And they're trying to confuse us with semantics. They think that we're going to read not fully vaccinated as unvaccinated. but it's really not the same thing.
Correct.
Yeah, so I have a lot of friends, a lot of people said they got the first and second, but they're not going to get a booster. That's where they're going to draw their line. Or some got
Correct.
the first and had a bad reaction, or they think they have immunity now, they have great antibodies and T cells now, they don't need a second. They're going to be called not fully vaccinated. So we have to be careful. I just wanted to interject that.
No, that's fine. That's why
hospitals
I
are fully
put it out
vaccinated.
there.
It's not that simple.
Right.
Well, it's just the same thing that they did, that WHO did way back before they released all of this. They changed the definition of pandemic. They changed the definition of virus. They changed
Anti-vaxxer.
right. They changed all of these definitions so that they could then turn around and officially use the right semantics.
Correct. So, well, there's that. So, boy,
Take a
you
breather.
set Elliot up like this. It's great.
I could talk about fascism for like 15
I love
minutes
it.
straight.
But I think that, by me saying those two very basic words that probably 95% of the population would use, you came back and qualified exactly what we're talking about, and the word salad that the medical profession is throwing out there.
They use semantics
the
a lot,
government.
and that's why on libertyblock.com, I don't know if the page is active, but we had a page called Jargon, and it explains a lot of jargon that either people don't understand the word for,
Yep.
like filibuster and cloture. People just don't use the word commonly. So I explain what they mean, or words that they use and they mean a little bit different than people think it means, like now anti-vaxxer and fully vaccinated. And there's a lot of other words. So I actually have like 10 or 15 other words on that section on libertyblock.com. And again, that's just one page on the site called Jargon. It explains political jargon. But we also have, in a lot of articles, we explain a lot of this stuff. That's why it's so important to be educated. And I'm constantly being educated about these semantics differences in the terms, because if you don't understand the terms, if you can't communicate with the same language, which politicians and tyrants don't use the same language as us, and they try to trick us,
Yep.
like circle back Saki. And that's what she does as a professional.
Oh, yeah.
It's fine. That's her job, is to spin things in the best way for dictator Biden. That's fine. But we have to understand how to parse through that language that they use.
Right.
Park the ways. Find out what she's really yakking about.
And which is also one of the reasons when you're talking to somebody, just an average Joe on the street, and they use a term, you want to say, what do you mean?
Exactly. What do you
It's-
mean?
Right, exactly.
Not what do you assume, or, I'm not going to assume what you mean, because you may not know the actual meaning of it, or you may be using it, as you said.
People attack capitalism. I just saw another friend. She was an EMT. And she said some meme about, I can't live in this world because capitalism has destroyed everything that makes sense in this world and has destroyed the world. I want to say to her, it was on Instagram, and I don't know how to use these young Instagram things, but I wanted to say, how do you define capitalism?
You're not that old.
Yeah, I'm bald already, Karen, but that gives me some old street cred. So I wanted to say, what do you mean? And she probably would have described crony capitalism, which I would describe as crony socialism or venture socialism, like the CCP in China, or in the United Socialist Republic of America.
Correct.
So she probably, if I would have just said free market, and it just means consent and voluntary interaction, like we discussed in the last episode, she'd probably agree. Do you believe in consent? Yes, she'd probably agree. Do you believe that people are free to exchange goods if they both agree? Yes, probably. Yes. So people, again, even with capitalism, there's a big issue with defining terms. And that's why I tend to use the term free market more than capitalism, I think, recently. And that's why capitalism has been hijacked by crony capitalism. And that's a big issue as well.
Wow. So we've got, we have so much to talk about. So let's do a short little in our 4 minutes, and then we'll come back and dive into the other bigger issues that we haven't even touched on. So masks as it relates to humanity. So we could probably touch on how difficult it is for those who are hard of hearing, people that are deaf, children.
So I think I have 2 chapters in the book about masks, maybe even 3. One of them just cites all the studies over the past 5-10 years, some in 2019, some in 2015, 2010, on surgical masks and N95 masks.
Yep.
I won't even discuss the lowest, the third level of masks, which is lingerie, the thin cloth over your face.
Yep.
That does nothing. I think we all know that now.
Lingerie.
Yeah. And I think Fauci or someone admitted the other day it does nothing. But even N95 masks, which is supposed to protect you from everything in the world, all the studies, and again, I have studies that I think are published on NIH, NCBI, like by the federal government.
Yep.
N95 masks do not stop the flu, and the flu is a bigger particle than COVID. So definitely don't stop COVID. N95 masks, I'll say it again, slower for the lefties in the back. Masks, even N95, do not do anything against the flu or COVID. Look at all the studies. It's all in the book. I cite the studies. Go to nih.gov. I think they're all still there. So, and I have screenshots in case they're taken down. And I think I updated the book. I think there are 12 or 13 or 14 studies now. Most of them are on N95 masks and surgical masks, saying
Correct.
there's no difference and they both do essentially nothing to decrease the spread, transmission, contraction of flu.
And in simple terms,
Any virus, probably.
right,
a good
exactly.
one.
The N95 mask, number one, you have to be fitted for it correctly. So they put a hood over you that's tight and on your shoulders, and they spray a sweet smelling chemical in there, and whether
If
you
you
can
don't
smell it
pass
or not
out.
with the N95 inside the big hood with the chemical being sprayed in determines whether that mask fits or not. So for all you people going out there and spending $39.95 for an N95 mask that is not fitted properly, and oh, by the way,
China thanks you for giving them billions, by the way.
one-time use.
But even if they are sealed perfectly, which is very, very difficult, even
yeah.
most doctors and medics probably don't wear them perfectly sealed. It has to be very, very tight, but and a certain amount of pressure on it. Even with that, I think the actual mask, it's supposed to block 95% of small particles, but it doesn't even block 95% of flu because flu is too small. Meaning
Correct.
COVID is way too small, like a
Right.
flea through a chicken wire fence. So that doesn't stop it. But I have a whole other chapter in the book about, people say there's no downside to a mask. Just wear the damn mask. There's no downside. There is.
There is a downside.
I have a whole
yeah.
chapter on medical downsides, like it probably decreases oxygen at least a little bit, increases CO2 retention at least a little bit, both of which are bad.
And then,
a lot of other issues as well.
Well, why don't we stop right there, because we've talked about your 3 chapters that you have.
It's either 2 or 3. I don't
Two,
remember.
I think it's 2,
offhand
and
what I
then you
there.
have numerous studies in here. So let's take a break right here. We'll come right back, and we'll talk about because I had mentioned about people being deaf and not being able to
the
hear. So
expressions,
reading lips, which my mother has a problem with. So you give it a perfect example. Please give her 15 of fentanyl, please.
I'll give her 50 of fentanyl.
And the nurse repeats, I'll give her 50. So 1-5 as opposed to 5-0.
And that happens already, but again, the masks make it that
yeah.
much worse.
Exactly.
Definitely.
And and we do have to remember that there are many people who cannot wear masks, not don't want to, cannot.
Children who
Right.
actually have problems wearing
Well, that's what I
masks.
mean. They cannot. We have people
Autistic.
from World War II that were forced to wear gas masks because you had to wear them or die, who cannot put them on. We have a very good friend, I will not mention their name, who was sexually assaulted. And there's many, many people who have been sexually assaulted. The hand was put over the mouth while they were severely injured and assaulted. Cannot put a mask on. We have children that have been abused. So I'll stop it right there. We'll come back with more masks, more corona fascism. You are with Chit Chatting with Jocelyn, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to Chit Chatting with Jocelyn. This is part 2 of Corona Fascism. Karen Testerman had to leave. She is running candidate for governor of the state of New Hampshire. So she's a busy, busy lady, and we're really happy to have her here. But Elliot was able to stay. So we're going to continue with this very, very controversial, very scary conversation about corona, just about medical health in general, what's happened to it in the last 2 years, what's happened to our governments, what's happened to our constitutional rights, what's happened to our economy. I mean, that's pretty much a mixed bag. So why don't I said we were going to talk about masks, but I think we've got too many other things to talk about. Let's just quick touch on things that you should have every day in your bathroom, just because this is an Spo2 monitor. You put it on your finger. It monitors your O2 level, your saturation level of the oxygen in your blood, and your pulse. So you don't freak out. Oh my God, my heart's going a million miles. If it's over 100, this will tell you, and you're not going to die, but you'll have an accurate reading. If I'm out of breath, how many people, I'm out of breath, and I'm not making fun of anybody. I can't breathe. Well, number 1, you're talking. Number 2, you're pink. Number 3, you're dry. You're not sweating. So stick this on your finger. And ladies, here's the fallacy. If you have nail polish, so you go like this. Here's your nail polish. Turn it to the side. Okay? Yeah. It still reads it. So you get one of these. You can tell what your pulse is. You can tell what your O2 level is. I've got people that were calling me going, oh my God, I'm at 95. You're fine. Sit down, take some deep breaths. take it in a couple minutes. If it's, 88, 89, 90, you need to, think about doing something. Am I right?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack about the pulse oximetry.
But,
it's a great tool that I use.
Just to keep it simple.
Yeah, it's a great tool. It has some limitations, but it has some great applications. So generally the recommendation from all the big medical associations for oxygen level, and that measures saturation of hemoglobin that's saturated generally with oxygen, but could be with other stuff. So your hemoglobin is what holds the oxygen molecules in your red blood cells. The general recommendation that should be between 94 and 100. So if it's above 94, 95 to 100, yeah, it's totally 100% normal. So even 95 is generally 100% normal. I'm probably at 99, 98, 100 now. It could be 95, totally normal. Below 94, it's considered a little low. Below 90 is like maybe moderately low. Below 85 or 80 is very, very low.
Correct.
Now the problem is the human body compensates, right? So if you're out of breath, your oxygen saturation will still probably be 95 to 100, but in order to compensate to keep it at 95 to 100, you may have to be breathing a lot faster.
Correct.
So when I see a patient who's 95%, I don't say, oh, they're fine, and walk away.
You have to look at the other circumstances.
Are they breathing at 36 times a minute, which is like double the normal, in order to get there? And same with heart rate and depths of the respirations. So if they're breathing heavier and faster,
then there's
keep it
something
up,
else going on. You need to look a little.
Yeah.
You need to look. You need to open up that pathway to a little bit wider and not be just on.
Yeah, so it's a great tool, but it has to be used in conjunction,
Right.
like everything else in medicine. With like an X-ray is good, but it's not the end-all be-all. It doesn't do everything in the world for you. An X-ray is just one tool that we have in our toolkit. So one of the few things a medic has is a pulse ox. That's great.
And something
so
that
use
you
it,
could
but
have that you don't need a degree, and you can get somewhat of an idea. And if you're still, you're at 95, 96, and you're definitely having difficulty breathing, yes, call somebody. But don't panic. At least get a baseline, have an idea what your heart rate is. The other thing, everybody, I can't believe how many people of you do not have a thermometer. And no, you don't need the one that looks like a gun that has a trigger that you pointed at your head, that you've taught your children to stand still for. Am I being ridiculous? No, because
I've had similar thoughts.
As a mom, it's a thermometer gun. And so where are all you moms and dads and everybody against guns? I pointed at your head, and there's a trigger, and I have to pull the trigger to take the temperature, and it goes click. It's a gun. And you're teaching your kids to stand there. Am I being a little over the edge? Yes, but think. What did you say 5 years ago? What did you say 3 years ago? And you're telling your kid, it's fine, it's just a temperature thing. What happens the next time the kid down the street takes a real gun and goes, it's just a thermometer gun? Plus, that aside, you don't get an accurate temperature out here, because every place that I went for the last 2 years that people took the temperature with the air gun, with the red dot, was inaccurate. Every
they're
single
horrifically inaccurate.
time.
So each of those guns that some of us carry on the ambulance, we have some of them. The manufacturer says you should be a certain length, a certain distance away from the skin, right?
Correct.
So go to the head or any central part, it's probably okay. Some of them, and you can test them on yourself. So if you and your partner are probably healthy because you're medics at work, test it on yourself and see how far do you have to be. And this is what I do to calibrate it. It's like a rough way to calibrate it on the fly. How far do you have to be to get 98.6? Because you could assume you and your partner are 98.6, or test a lot of people. And the manufacturer should say, the manual, you should be 2 inches. Some are 5 inches, some are 2 inches, some are 1 inch, some are on the skin. If it should be on the skin or 1 inch and you're 7 inches away, what's going to happen is the ambient air, which is 70 here, but outside on the road with patients, it's 50 or 20 or 10 now. That ambient air of 3 inches will cool it off. So the reading on the thermometer might say the patient's 65 degrees or 70, right? Or 90 or 95 degrees, which we get a lot because it's too far and the ambient air is what it's getting. So yeah, you have to know how to use it. Like any other tool, you have to know how to use it and what its limitations are and what the manufacturer's suggestions are.
And I bring that up because that is, as you can tell, is a big pet peeve of mine, the thing. But you'd go to a store and some non-medical, non-trained, nobody standing there goes,
yeah. And even those who are trained, even the good doctors and nurses and medics, to be honest, have gotten very lazy and callous to this, I think.
But when you're supposed to keep 6 feet and then all of a sudden this person's coming close to you, and you don't know that, and they whip up and they got their finger on it, I lose it. There's been a couple of people that got a swift kick in the you-know-where, and I'm sorry, you don't come close to me. You don't not announce what you're doing. So anyway, long story, digital thermometer, the old-fashioned one that for babies you put on one end and for grown-ups you put at the other end.
But please wash it in between those two.
Yeah, use the little alcohol wipe with the little sleeves and throw the sleeve away. Everybody should have one of these. And so just for giggles, my brother came by because he was given 2 of these. And he said, because your boys have to test. And if you don't have symptoms, FYI, they do charge you. It's $195. Prove me wrong, because both my sons paid $195 because they had to test. They had to test for work, and they had no symptoms, and they paid $195 each. You want to get caught with that. So anyway, my brother brought these by for a backup. It's the Rapid. This product has not been FDA cleared or approved, period, but has been authorized by the FDA under the emergency use authorization for the detection of SARS-CoV-2, otherwise known as COVID-19. Isn't that interesting?
Well, I don't really trust the FDA or anyone in DC regardless, but can I give my rant real quick about tests? About testing?
Absolutely.
So I used to think, like I was telling you before we went live, when I was a very new medic years ago, or a new EMT, I used to think that, why don't we test everyone for everything? Why doesn't every patient who goes in the ER get a full workup of a full blood work for everything? Full MRI, pan scan, meaning scanning MRI of every part of the body. An MRI is the longer version. Unlike a CT, it takes 20, 30, 40 minutes, and it scans like a transverse slice, I think, of every single part of the body. It's amazing. Gives you tremendous info. X-rays, EEG, echo, EKG. Why don't we do that for every patient? We would find pretty much everything in the world bothering every patient, every issue. And I used to think, it makes sense. Every patient in the hospital should be scanned for everything. In fact, Bob Page, one of the leading cardiology lecturers, says everyone should get an 18 lead. And I get it. Here's the other side, though. And this is what I think my brother, who's also a medic, or someone else schooled me, and they explained. There's a reason we only do tests for people when they have a certain issue that leads us to want to test for that thing. So if they have symptoms like their arm is deformed, we will do an arm x-ray to see if there's a fracture. If they're just walking down the street and they go to a hospital because they wander into an ER, we're not going to x-ray every part of their body. That's needless radiation, which will obviously contribute to cancer. It's going to cost money and time, and it will block those resources for the trauma coming in from the MVA who does need x-ray of every part of the body. So there are so many reasons: the money, the time, the resources, and it can damage the radiation. And MRI is magnetic, but CT is radiation, X-ray is radiation, and a whole lot of other tests are radiation in the hospital, or just giving them tests or medications that can do harm and not benefit them.
Correct.
Also, there's something called by a nickname, incidental OMA, like an incidental finding of some kind of cancer. So when they do these big scans, like a pan scan of the whole body with MRI for a patient with a heart issue or some random issue, and they happen to find a tiny cancerous tumor in any part of the body, now the doctor legally and ethically has to investigate it, meaning hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars of more testing, another 5 days in the hospital, so tons of time and money. And again, that ICU bed or that hospital bed is now occupied, so someone else does not get that bed.
Correct.
Because now
that needs it right away.
And now everyone's talking about the hospitals being overwhelmed because they fired half the staff. But that part, it's that bed and those other resources are also being blocked. So that doctor, that nurse, that tech, the janitor, everyone is being occupied with that patient. So there are a lot of reasons, as you can see, to not test everyone for everything. Because again, if you look, you're going to find it, right? There's a famous saying, if you look, you're going to find it. If you did an MRI, I'm pretty healthy, I think. If you do an MRI of my entire body, you're going to find various things, many things. So there's a reason, I can go get an MRI of everything. They'll discover one tiny polyp in my colon. Great, now I'm in the ICU or the GI unit in the hospital for 7 days while they investigate, and then I get a bill for $1 million or $500,000.
Yep.
It's needless. There's a reason why we don't test everyone for everything. So now, again, for the first time ever, where we're in an age where, again, it's commonplace, right? Mm-hmm. Everyone, it's the common thing to do. Everyone gets tested for COVID every day or every other day, depending on the part of the world. It's kind of like a normal thing. Oh, get tested for COVID every other day. Everyone in my work and in other, not just medicine, in every industry, it seems, and regular families say, let's get tested every 2-3 days, just in case. And again, there are plenty of memes we've seen online. Some of them are rather funny that say it's a virus so dangerous that you have to, go and get a test to see if you have it. Again, and at first I didn't understand that, but now it makes sense. Like, if it were really that dangerous and you were coughing and not breathing properly and chest pain and you were dying and you're returning cyanotic blue, Like you would know you have it. You don't need a test, right? So
Correct.
there is some truth to that meme, I think.
Yep.
If it really were that dangerous or were killing you, you'd know if you had it. For instance, broken arm. Generally, when I have a broken arm, I know it's broken because there's pain and deformation, right, and swelling. So I don't have to get a test. You can get an X-ray to confirm maybe, but you don't have to. I don't go in for a pan scan, MRI every time I go to the gym just in case I got hurt.
Right.
I could have. I went to the gym earlier. I did shoulders and biceps. I might have pulled something,
Right.
but am I
you're
going to
not
get an
gonna go-
MRI to check on every single ligament and tendon? I might have pulled something. I don't know, but I'm not going to do that, right? So there's a reason we don't occupy resources, waste money, and get tested for everything because we might find incidentalomas. So that's the big rant on testing, and that's just it pisses me off so much. Everyone getting tests if you're not symptomatic. If you're not symptomatic, you shouldn't get a test for anything. Almost no exceptions to that. So
Correct.
if you don't have symptoms, you don't need a test.
And God only knows what's on the tip of it, that you don't need to be shoving up your nose right into that nasal brain level, but I'm not going to go there. So those are just a few things you should have. You should have Tylenol. You should have baby aspirins. You should have, Pedialyte. You should have what's it called? The rehydration powders.
All the electrolytes, and there's something.
Electrolytes.
So electrolyte, again, talk about like jargon. Electrolyte just means any compound, any element that becomes an ion, gains or loses an electron in water, right? That's all electrolyte means, I believe,
Yep.
if I remember my chemistry from high school. So, the sports drinks say we have electrolytes. Electrolytes is what the plants crave in Idiocracy, which is now obviously no longer a fiction movie. It's now like a real documentary. So electrolyte just means anything that becomes an ion in water. That includes sodium, magnesium, calcium, potassium, chlorine,
Right.
The ones in your body. The most common ones in your body are sodium, potassium, and a few others. Most of those drinks just have sodium, which we all get plenty of sodium.
Right.
We all get too much salt anyway.
Right.
You go to McDonald's once, and that's like a weekly dose, recommended dose of sodium. So we all have enough sodium. When we sweat and we need to replace electrolytes, it's almost never sodium. We need to replace, I think, potassium, maybe calcium, maybe magnesium, and maybe a few others.
Correct.
Maybe phosphorus and chlorine. So the problem with those drinks, like Gatorade and almost all those drinks, they have a ton of sodium,
And a ton of
30 grams
sugar.
of sugar.
Sugar.
And I think the daily recommended value, if you trust the FDA, is I think 30 or 40, 50, 60. So 30 is either the full or half daily value. So they have tons of sugar and sodium, two things you don't need more of. I get plenty. I got way too much sodium and sugar. There's one drink, and I'll give a free commercial for them now. It's called Body Armor. And it has very little sugar. At least their light version. It's like LYTE, their light version. It has like 2 grams of sugar. Still tastes sweet. It's got natural fruits in there. And it has high potassium and very little sodium. So very little sodium,
good to
very little
know.
sugar, a lot of potassium, and
Yep.
some other electrolytes too, I believe. And it hydrates you and tastes great. So that's the only thing I drink. I can't drink Gatorade anymore.
I
For the
can't
others,
drink-
Knowing
yeah.
that it has 30 grams of sugar.
I can't drink
Yeah.
any of those. Pedialyte for the kids, but these rehydration powders are better than the drinks, and that's something that's out there. So,
Yeah, Pedialyte's phenomenal. Yeah, and speaking of powders, get some emergency or whatever vitamin C.
emergency vitamin C.
So
Yeah.
I have that, and I put in. To be honest, whenever I put in a pre-workout or a drink in my
Yep,
shaker,
you'll put one of those
I put
in.
and the orange tastes really good. It makes it taste better, and I'm just getting a little immune boost. Again, not a crazy wacko conspiracy theorist. I don't know my vitamin C levels. I don't have the money to do a blood draw every day. I don't know if it's low or normal. If it's normal, vitamin C doesn't help. You pee it out.
You just pee it out.
Yeah, if it's low, it's going to help a little bit. So I figure there's probably no risk, and there might be a benefit. I don't know. And same with vitamin D.
I was gonna say
I get very little
exactly.
vitamin D. You see how white I am? If I go out in the sun for literally in 10 minutes, I burn in 10 minutes. So 10 minutes or 30 minutes, even if it's cloudy, I'll burn. So I don't get a ton of sun. I just don't.
Right, so
My
you
wife
take
gets sun,
vitamin
I don't.
D3,
So
yeah.
I'm probably always low on vitamin D, I assume. So I do take. I don't take supplements. I drink milk and stuff. But get some vitamin C. I try to go outside for a few minutes in the sun every day. And we saw with the early studies with COVID, we saw in the ICUs patients had low vitamin D, the sickest patients. Now that being said, the caveat is again we don't know about confounding variables. When you're in the ICU for 10 days, what don't you get? Sun.
Sun.
Right? Yeah. So those patients, I don't know what came first, chicken or egg. But I think there were other studies linking vitamin D and I think vitamin C.
There's numerous because the
and I
vitamin
think they're doing
C.
infusions of high dose vitamin C and D and zinc and azithromycin initially.
Correct.
And then ivermectin
That's
and
the
hydroxychloroquine.
Zelenko protocol.
Yeah,
There's
the whole massive
numerous-
protocol of.
Yep.
And by the way, looking at a little research, I don't look at a ton compared to like my brother and other medics and doctors, but when you look at the sepsis, obviously for decades now they've been trying to solve sepsis because the majority of patients die ultimately from sepsis. I think one of the protocols that I think had some promising studies a few years ago, before COVID, was I believe super high dose vitamin C
Yep.
IV infusions for sepsis, and I think maybe some zinc and some other stuff. And when used together, they all might have had a synergistic effect as well.
Correct.
So I know it's so hard to know what's conspiracy wacko theory and what's not. And I'm in a really awkward place. I'm in medicine. I'm in hospitals and EMS, and I trust the science. I trust medicine. At the same time, I ask questions. At the same time, I know that there are some bad actors in big pharma and in politics, they're mostly bad actors. But I know that I trust the studies in general, although now I can't trust studies anymore because the FDA or CDC or whoever, the big media, the fascism, as I say in the book, Corona Fascism, the politicians and the big pharma and big media that controls the publications, because there are only a few major publications: New England Journal of Medicine, American Medical Association, AMA journal, so JAMA is their journal, and a few other big ones. And we've seen now over the last few years that if you have a study that goes against the Corona Fascism talking points,
It gets
they
bury
won't they won't publish it. In fact,
Correct.
one, I think Johns Hopkins University, I believe, had a paper. I forget what it was about. It was either natural immunity or something, saying, to relax on Corona Fascism fear porn, and it was published by one of their PhDs or something, and the next day it was pulled. So, we've
So
seen
we
this
can't
happen a
even
lot.
trust that now.
So and that's after that happened and a few others, and after I think the former editor-in-chief of New England Journal of Medicine came out and said it's all garbage. They censor what's put through. It all has to align with Corona Fascism. I don't trust it anymore. And when the former editor-in-chief of that journal said they can't trust it anymore, that's one more reason not to trust it. But yeah, for a few years now, I've had a hard time trusting the official medicine, which is very scary to me. And I've had some weird moments where I'm talking to doctors in the hospitals and they're seeing that same light bulb, but deer in the headlights look of saying, oh my God, I can't trust medicine anymore. And, it's really scary. I've had discussions with my doctor, with other doctors in ERs. It's weird. We don't know who to trust anymore. Doctors, a lot are very much cookbook doctors. A lot of them are independent thinkers. A lot of them are smart, independent, and skeptical. And I've spoken to both types.
But they're all working for a group, for a hospital. We got hospitalists. Doctors aren't, taking care of their own patients. They're pushed out at the door at the hospitals, and we've got some absolute stranger that's taking care of you, who, doesn't have your whole history, that isn't listening to you, that just kind of brings everybody together. And oh, by the way, we have the driving force, especially with Corona here, that if it's I think it was $19,000 if you're diagnosed with it. If you're ventilated, it's $39,000. If you die of it, or if you leave the hospital or you die of it, that you get the hospital bill plus 20%.
Exactly. And with CMS, the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, they are essentially a leverage tool, right? So because I think 70 or 80% of payers in the United States, patients, are primarily Medicaid or Medicare payers, right? So that's their insurance, and it's the federal government. And Medicaid is state federal. So I said years ago, I think 5-10 years ago, before Corona Fascism, I said CMS is a dangerous tool that could be used for leverage for the government to influence what doctors, hospitals, and all of healthcare does. And again, I hate to say I'm a prophet, but I warned about it years ago. 5-10 years ago, I've been warning about CMS. It's too dangerous. And now we see, and other lefties are proposing that, why doesn't CMS or other private health insurance or private employers increase the premiums that the employee pays if they're not vaccinated? Because if you're unvaccinated, you're more dangerous.
I saw that yesterday.
Yeah, even though, again, the Pfizer CEO is admitting, if you get 2 shots, you get little to no protection.
Right.
They literally say this, but they are living in 2 realities at the same time, and that's mass psychosis.
Exactly. And the hypocrisy is the people that have smoked their whole lives, they're not paying higher premiums because they're destroying their lungs. They are not charging people that are obese, that leads them to heart attacks and high blood pressure, blah, blah, blah. They didn't say, oh, you've got to pay this. No, they're picking on people that are unvaccinated. And in the first half, if you go back and watch the show, Elliot was explaining that unvaccinated, that the goal line of what it really means keeps shifting.
And they use the term not fully vaccinated, and that's why.
Fully vaccinated now. So when the politicians and Big Pharma and Ouchie and 46 start talking about the unvaccinated, well, what does that term mean? Is that unvaccinated, that you've got nothing, you haven't had COVID and you have no antibodies, which, oh, by the way, they're not testing for, or you've had COVID and you've got antibodies, or you are so highly allergic that you would die if you took it, or you took the first jab and you went into anaphylactic shock. They don't take any of that into account. And that's the problem. That's what we're dealing with right now. People playing around with words, throwing them out, tossing them around like they're nothing.
And if they want to open that can of worms of discrimination, of making people who are unvaccinated pay more or making the fully vaccinated pay less, then they have to do the same with obesity. And I think I have a chapter in the book about that, or I've definitely written articles about it. If we are going to say, how some professors and even some doctors, I believe, some really sick progressives are saying those who are not fully vaccinated shouldn't get treated in the ICU or should pay for their own bills, no insurance should cover it, or just throw them out of the hospital or let them die, right?
That's actually really happening already.
well, we have to do the same for obese because, and here's what I realized a few months ago. I thought about it because someone said those who are unvaccinated, imagine the vaccine worked 100%. It's not that safe and it's not that effective, but imagine if it were safe and effective 100%. Like the Supreme Court genius God justices who are gods, they said the other day, we know that masks and vaccines 100% stop COVID, which is totally lie, So imagine if it did. Even if it did, and it totally stopped them still. So imagine that the unvaccinated, it works. Unvaccinated are taking a risk and the vaccinated are not taking a risk. Because the unvaccinated are engaging in risky behavior, just like the obese and guys who drive motorcycles, we call them donor cycles, obese and smokers and all that. Imagine if, so that illness is caused by their own behavior, right? So we say it with smokers and we've said it with unvaccinated. And then I started thinking about it a few months ago and I realized only a few months ago, after I first published the book, almost every illness that we see in the ambulance and the ERs and ICUs, it's caused by their own behavior.
Correct.
COPD, it's caused, I don't know, maybe 99% by smoking. A lot of trauma, half the MVAs are caused by your own behavior. You're texting,
Right.
you're drinking, you're on a motorcycle, you're driving in the
too
snow,
fast.
right? So most MVAs, COPD, heart disease, it's caused by eating cheeseburgers and not exercising enough, right? I would say maybe 80% of heart disease is caused by your own behavior, right? It's your own decisions. The only things that are not are CF, cystic fibrosis, maybe MS,
Yep.
what else? Maybe CP. A few things are caused by not your own fault. Most
Correct.
things are actually caused by your own fault, right?
Right.
Diabetes, it's because
Caused by- yeah.
you're fat slut. You don't go to the gym enough. You eat badly. Heart disease, COPD, trauma. Almost every issue, strokes, clotting. Almost every issue is caused by your own behavior, and I didn't realize this till a few months ago. So should we not treat? And that's why I wrote the article a few months ago on libertyblock.com. If we are going to stop treating people who are in the hospital because of their own actions, and I admit,
Then you're not going to have a business.
I'm going to have heart disease at 70 also, and it's because I love cheeseburgers, I love sugar, I eat way too much sugar, and it is what it is. Are you not going to treat me when I have diabetes and heart disease when I'm 70? Because I will have it. I'm
Not
sure.
based on what they're saying right now.
So if you know what I mean? What's good for the goose is good for the gander. If we're going to not treat people because they've done,
Made
made
bad
poor
life
health
choices.
decisions,
Yep.
let's do it across the board. Anyone who's obese, so anyone who goes to the hospital with a BMI over 30, which is a lot of people in the United States, let's throw them out of the hospital. Let's see that happen and then see the lawsuits that happen for
Correct.
discrimination.
Yeah, I actually agree. And this, this is tough talk, people, but you cannot just have people throw out these discriminatory statements that these people. I mean, actually, Justin Trudeau of the Prime Minister of Canada, he actually called us those people, and no space should be made for them.
I think they've called us worse things than that.
I've
been called a lot worse.
But I mean, straight out pitting human being against human being, when the science and what we're seeing in the hospitals is not what's coming out of the mouths of the politicians. All right, well, God, we didn't even get what we needed done.
We didn't even talk about the economy.
We didn't even talk
which is
about
the
the
big thing.
economy.
As
So
a self-fashioned economist, I love talking economics.
we need to come back and have you do
Well, there's a whole
hour
chapter
on
on that, and I
Okay.
could do a real quick rant for a minute here.
Do a minute.
Yeah,
Go for it.
yeah. I'll try not to talk too fast. So in the book, there's a whole chapter on the economy, and I explain how a healthy economy means healthy people. Because as you remember, they shut down the world economy. We had the biggest one-day fall or biggest
Crash.
fall in the stock market, S&P and Dow, in history of the stock market. Worse than the Great Depression, I believe. So that crushed jobs, crushed the economy worldwide, and of course, it made millions more unemployed in the United States and around the world, right? And then we went to Concord, we were doing protests, and we said, bring our economy back, let us get back to work. I just want my job back, let me work, don't send men with guns to prevent me from working. That's all we were saying.
Yep.
I'm not asking for a handout, let me go to work and don't kill me. That's all. Let me keep my business open and don't send men with guns to kill me, police, right? The police that we all love in New Hampshire, right? They're the ones enforcing fascism, right? So people attack us and say, you greedy capitalists just care about the economy. It's not about money, it's about lives. Okay, I have a whole chapter, it explains the data. There is a tremendous correlation between the amount of money you make individually and as a society, as a community, and your life expectancy. Africa, I look at the 100 poorest nations in the world, I believe, where the average annual salary or median household income is like $13 per year.
Correct,
Not
per
like
year.
$80,000, like $13 or $10. Their life expectancy is like 50. In the United States, what is it, 78?
78?
Yeah, yeah.
76,
So,
78.
and in places where it's even more, and look at states and cities, the higher look at politicians. They make $174,000 a year, and they're living, Pelosi's like 87,000 years old, Dictator Biden's 80-something years old. They all live till 90, 95, 100, right? Soros, Rothschild, these people are living way beyond 100, right? So obviously, if you have money, you can afford good healthcare and a good lifestyle. So it's pretty intuitive. It's common sense.
Right.
Very
That
few
if
would
you
argue,
if you
yeah.
can earn money, you can make a good living.
Yep.
You can purchase and obtain the things that are going to make you healthier and happier, and therefore a much better person and productive to society.
And there are studies on this. As you lose your job, once you're unemployed, within around a year, the rates of depression, drug abuse, and suicide go way up as well.
Which correlates directly to the children that have not been able to go to school because they've been masked or doing remote learning. Oh my goodness. Wow. He did do that in a minute and a half. So I want to thank you so much for coming. As usual, it is a huge amount of information, all useful information. It is stuff that we need to look into. Again, it's Elliot Axelman, and he's done numerous books, libertyblock.com. Can they get these books on Amazon or on Liberty Block?
Well, on the site, but on Amazon is the best place to buy them directly.
Amazon is the best place
and
to buy them.
It's called Coronavirus now.
Coronavirus, the plague that must not be questioned. But he's got numerous books. He's going to make you super smart. There's no reason for him doing this except that he wants to educate us all. So thank you so much for joining me, Chit-Chatting with Jocelyn, and we will see you next time.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.